Hello, hello, hello. Crafty Chris here for another Thursday night Scrap Your Scraps. Tonight we are using very minimum scraps, but this is more of an organizational video just to show you how I keep track of and how I know what my different products I have in my scrap room do. So I have got what they call a snap album. It's a Spellbinders product, and inside there's various different kinds of pockets. So this is 4x6 pockets. These are 2x2 pockets, and then there are pockets that are 3x3s and 3x3s with a 4. So a variety of different configurations in these plastic pockets. What I generally use, the biggest portion of my organizer, is the 2x2 pockets for samples, but then I have little experiments I've done, and I've got other sized pockets in the back to keep those little bit of experiments that I find are interesting that I might want to refer to at another time. So I just, I've got the inks all up at the front here, and I've got distress crayons in here. I have different things. I have my wax seals, what seals I have, all of my Posca markers and my aqua markers and my tri-blends and my gelatos and my stickles and my eyes ink and my experimental stuff. So I am going to finish off some eyes ink products. I've got all the colors that I own in here so that I can see how they play out. I've got the pearlies and I've got the ices, and on the back, and I have the paint, and on the back I'm going to add in some textures. So I have crackle texture, bead texture, and flaky texture, which I don't have in my samples. These products are a couple of years old, so I'm not sure if they're still available, but you could check. It's a Seth Apter product through Adeline, which I think is a UK company. So there might still be available. You'd have to purchase it from the UK. Now, I am going to do two samples. I'm going to do just the texture, and then I'm going to add some reinker into it to see what it looks like with the color, just so I have that as a reference. The first thing I need to do, though, is to get some cardstock, just any old cardstock. So this is where the scraps come in. All of these are made out of scraps that I had lying around. I use a lot of white, so that came in handy. And I'm just going to let you know that if you're doing flat things like sprays and inks, you can cut these things pretty true to size, 2x2. However, if you're doing things that have texture, you want to narrow the sides so that the pocket has enough room for that bulky item. So for today's, because these are textures and I want to grab that texture, I'm going to be cutting them 2 by just a little bit under 2. Okay, so let's get that. I'm going to cut one side the exact 2, and then I'm going to cut the ooh, that's a crummy edge. Make sure your edges are nice and clean. Then I'm going to cut just under, like a 1/16 of an inch under, to make sure that I have enough space for my texture to pop up and it won't get broken when I'm creating. All right. This goes back in my stash. As you know, I don't throw anything out. Normally this would go back in my stash, so I think I'll stay true to my system. And, well, different kind of black paper, but it doesn't matter. And these will all go back in my stash, and this is garbage because it's too tiny. All right, let's get the cutter off to the side here, out of the way. Okay, so I always use the smooth side of my cardstock when I'm doing samples. So the first I'm going to break them into 2s because we're going to do crackle first, then we'll do the other 2 as we go. And I'm just going to put a tiny bit of reinker on my mat. That's probably even more than I need, but that's all right. Okay, so we're going to start off with crackle texture. Now this ended up, the actual neck of the squishy container got hard, so I couldn't get in to the crackle, so I just cut it off. Oh, look at all that beautiful crackly stuff there. I just cut the top off, and I've turned it over twice and put a clip on it, and hopefully that will work in the long run. This stuff does have crunchiness to it. Oh yeah, it's good inside. So I want to make sure that all of this powdery stuff is off to the side. I don't want that powdery stuff on my sample. And I am going to pull out some crackle. I probably don't even need that much, a little bit less than that. And I'm literally going to lay it out and just leave like about 1/4 of an inch at the top so I can label it properly. And I'm just going to spread that out. And the thing about crackle is you don't want it too thick, but you also don't want it too thin. So what I do with my samples is I create a thicker area so that you can see what the thickness looks like if you have it thicker. And then I really try hard to make a thinner area right here so that you can see the two different types of crackle, because thinner and thicker do make a difference to crackle paste. I'm just going to close that up while I do this one. And you want to make sure you have something to clean up the mess. And normally I would not heat crackle paste, because when you heat it, it crackles differently than if you just let it air dry. But I know that. So when I look at this sample, I will know that it was heat dried, and I'll write on it that it was heat dried. So when I refer to it later, if I've forgotten, it will remind me, and I'll know that the crackle that exists for that one is different than what I would normally do if I air dried. And air drying takes 24 hours. You need to let it go for a day. And now I'm going to get some, not that much, I'm going to get some of this, do this up again. There's a little bit plopping out there. Fold that over and keep it sealed, and it seems to be working. And now I don't want to stick this, well, I guess it doesn't matter. I just want to put a dab on the top of my spatula, like literally hardly anything, because the colors are pretty intense for the reinkers. I just want to create something that I know I can see the color in, and it's different than white. And I'm looking at this, and I might even add a tiny bit more just to give it a little more intensity, because it's going on black. And the reason I'm putting it on black is so that you can see that crackle and that texture. You can see it on white too, but not as obviously. You have to look a little closer on white. All right, I think we're ready to go. Pick as much as I can. Leave that 1/4 inch at the top there. Make a nice thick layer. And then go across the bottom with a thinner layer. Now, interesting enough, there are some crunchy pieces in here, which I might have got from the lip of the container, which makes it very difficult to do a nice smooth layer. So you want to try to get those crunchy things out of there. There we go. And this one I want thicker. All right. So we're going to set those aside. So that's our crackle. And we're going to clean up the mess a little bit. Get what we can off the palette knife, because we don't want to contaminate one thing with the other. And I'm going to wipe this down. Otherwise, it'll just get crunchy and go all over the place. All right, now we're going to do texture paste, or flaky, yes, flaky texture. And this one is really interesting because it has flakes in it, actual flakes. And I need a fair amount with this one because the flakes are so big that they take a lot of the actual space. So I'm just going to add this down. And this, I can do a thin layer, a thick layer, whatever I want. I don't have to worry about crackling happening with this one. It's just a very pretty texture. I don't want anything kind of going over the edge because I won't be able to get it into the pocket that way. So look at how fun that texture is. Can you see the flakes? They're little teeny tiny flakes mixed in with probably the same stuff that is in the beads texture. Now this stuff has gone slightly dry, just having it open to air, that's what happens. So let's clean off that. And we're going to put another slushy amount with some blue in it. Come on. There we go. Now always make sure you put that lid back on nice and tight. And we're going to put some blue into it. Now, what we'll color with this will mostly be the white paste that's holding it together. Over time, the blue will stain the flakes, but they will sort of be kind of held in the blue paste, but they'll look white until they kind of settle into, and I'll show you what I mean. Whoops, a little too high. I need that space. And I'm just going to cover the bottom, and I have to make sure that the flaky is staying on the actual paper and not the sides. Don't want the sides to get it in the container. So if you look carefully, you can still, maybe if I just turn this light down a little. It's very hard to show you, but you can still see the pieces that are white in there. That's the flaky part, and like I said, the background is the thing that catches the color initially. But over time, it like dyes it, so it's all good. All right, clean this off. And we're going to do our last one. And then I'm going to go away and dry them all up so I can show you what's going on. Whoops. Oh, this one is already stuck down. That's going to be a scraper, which is fine. All right. And now we're doing our bead texture, which is an interesting texture as well. I think I'll do it over here because this is dry now. Bead texture. Actually need some more. This one is very three-dimensional, and you want to make sure that you can see that texture. And again, you want to make sure you get the beads off the edge. You don't want that to go on the edge because it will prevent you from sticking it in. And look how interesting that is. Let me see if I can get it to focus better. Do you see those beads in there? It's a fun texture. Lots of beads. When it's dry, you can see it a little bit easier. All right. Don't have much of this left. So now we're going to mix some blue in. Put that on there. I hope I have enough. Get that all off before it dries. It's an interesting texture to spread because it's like beady and it rolls and Sometimes you can't get it where you want it to go because the beads will come, but the paste doesn't come, or the paste will come and the beads won't come. But it's a fun texture, and it just gives you that little bit of difference. You can see the beads there very clearly now. Cool. All right, so I'm leaving that ink there because there's one more thing I want to do. I am going to go off screen and dry these guys down, and then we'll talk a bit more about them. While these guys are all drying, I'm just going to show you how I clean up my mat. So with these kinds of pastes, these have, I think, acrylic in them. So when you heat things or when you let it dry, it becomes you can't add water to it to moisten it so that you can wipe it off. So all you do is you just go in with a Teflon scraper and you just scrape that all off your mat. Now, if there's color involved, you might want to go over it again afterwards with a clean thing, and then all that stuff just gets wiped off your Teflon. And you get rid of the little bitty bits, and you're good to go. So I've kept a little bit of ink because I want to play around with, these aren't quite dry yet. You can see the darker parts are still quite wet. So I'm going to add a little bit of ink. And I'm just going to go over top. You might need a little bit of water here. There we go. So it's mostly resisting, except in the little cracks. So you can't really see that. It's hard for me to show you. So because these are acrylic based, and they are shiny acrylic based, the ink doesn't like to sit on top. I can literally, after I dry this, I could wipe that ink off with a wet towel, but it will go into the cracks. So if you used a different color, it would go into the cracks and stick on the paper. So you would see it, and then you would just buff the surface to get it off the actual flat part. So let me try a little bit on here. I'm just adding some of the blue here. I'm going in, and for the sake of not having something to wipe it off, I'm wiping it off and buffing it a little bit. If you can see that, it really highlights the crevices that are there. So often it's just not about the cracking, it's also about highlighting. And you want to make sure you don't play with it too much before you get it in your sample container, because it will, the pressure of putting it in will crack it off. And you are currently hearing my dog wanting to get in, so I apologize for all the excess noise. All right, so now comes the time where I do my labeling. And so I put the name of the product, which is iZink. And you know, with your weight pens, you have to get them started before they'll work. And this one is iZink Beads. So there we go. And this is iZink Beads with Faded Jeans. And I'll know that that's a Tim Holtz thing. There we go. These are still quite wet. And this is iZink Flaky. And this is iZink Crackle. All right. So let me just test that these could be ready to go in. Some of the texture is quite high, so I'm just going to take a tiny bit more off the side. I don't want to have to struggle getting them in where I might damage the surface. So I'm just going to take this and take off that. And I don't want to put too much pressure. There we go. You see what happens if you put pressure on it? It just snaps. And this isn't the best cutter. A guillotine is not the best cutter for cutting media that is already on your paper. There is a better cutter for that. I'm going to take a little off both sides of this one. It's better to use a rotary cutter because it rolls through rather than chops down. If it weren't for the interest of time in the video, I would wait 24 hours before I do this, because you really do risk having a bit of a mess on your cutter and on your samples. But I've been very lucky. Alrighty, so now let's try and get those into our album. Alright, and we are going to put that with the eyes ink. That's all paint, tri-blend, eyes ink. There we go. So here's our eyes ink. And we'll put this on the back. And I generally use crappy paper. As you can see, I've got old business cards that I use, but I leave this in if I'm going to be using white, so I can just pull this out and use this and stick it in there. But I'm using black, so it is a bit of a different thing. Okay, so our crackle goes in there, and see, because I've cut it down, now I have space for that nice clump of crackle. You just want to make sure that the pocket will accept and not destroy. Oh, I'm going to get my finger in there. There we go. Slip that in. And it slips in quite nicely. I'm very happy with that. Let's just push that down a tiny bit more. There we go. And now I have my samples of the crackle. I'm going to pull out. The trick is getting them out afterwards. There we go. And I'm going to need I think I'm going to leave this one in. There we go. And I'm going to take that one out so the cracklers or the textures are all together. There we go. All right, now putting this one in first, very gently, because it doesn't feel like these guys are quite dry. And I'm just wondering if I really want to risk it. Nope, it's going in. There we go. Awesome. That did go in okay. And we're going to do the same one here. Whoops. Just lifting it, making a little hole of air, and then pushing it in. Yeah, you really have to be on this side for it. So textures, like I said, are a bit more of a struggle to get them in. Whoop, whoop, there we go. Oh, that's beautiful. I can see white and blue flakies. And then the beads we're going to go underneath. I don't expect I'm going to get any more acrylic paints, which this is the only sample I have of that, just because they're not available in Canada anymore, to my knowledge. All right, now this one is a bit tackier. Let's see. See if we can get that in without destroying it. It's a bit wet. So the paper itself is a bit damp still. This one may not be as bad, and it's close to the seam as well. So that makes it a little trickier to put in. Yeah, both these guys are a little too wet yet. So we're going to leave that. But this gives you the idea. And that's the places that they'll go. And just so you can see now, this is the flaky texture. You can see all the flakes lined up there. And this is the crackle texture. We have the fine crackle happening down here. We have larger crackle in the more open spots. And we have, and this will continue to dry, so it's going to crackle more. So we have some fracturing and crackling there and some fine crackling down here. You can't even see this because I don't think I can get close enough to show you, but there's also like hairline fracturing going on down there and here. This is where we put the blue in so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, so that is my tips and tricks for keeping your samples and having easy access. Because if you're anything like me, you've got bottles and jars and pens and things everywhere. And they could be in a drawer, they could be exposed, but then there's 80 of them all on a shelf. So this is kind of the way that I approach looking for colors. So if I'm doing something that's ink-based, I'll look at all my ink-based colors and decide, and I don't even stay true to the brand. So if I like that antique bronze better than this bronze, then I will use that antique bronze with that purple and that green. What else? And, maybe I'll go to my distress colors to get some interesting texture. So there's, and that's nice about the sampling is that you can see the texture as well. So that's basically it, folks. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope that you're able to get your samples made and organized so that you don't constantly spend an hour or two trying to find things or figure out what you would like to use. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Please subscribe to my channel at the end of the video under the video, and we'll see you next time. Bye.